So this talk is focused on powering up anti-racism in museums. We'll wait for the clap. We've been doing a huge amount of work in Wales, and Dr. Marion Gwyn and Charlotte will talk a bit more about that in their talks. Just to let you know, if you're interested, we have got a few copies of the case studies in hard copy that's associated with this programme, and it's also available as a free download from the GEM website. So without further ado, I'm really delighted to introduce you to Dr. Marion Gwyn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's a huge pleasure to be here today. Thank you. Now, I'm absolutely delighted to be sharing the platform here today with Charlotte. Now, my eldest daughter is a chemist, and I was explaining to her what we were doing today, and she said, well, go you in the humanities, taking your evidence along with you like a scientist. And I was thinking, yeah, that's absolutely right. Because when you're dealing with something like anti-racism, if it doesn't work in practice, then it's not working. And so it is a real pleasure to be sharing the platform with Charlotte here today. And so what is all of this about? What does powering up anti-racism in museum education actually mean? And especially, this is of high relevance to Wales. And this has come about really since that massive upsurge of energy regarding social justice that grew out of 2020, the very public death of George Floyd, the pulling down of the Colston statue. And the Welsh Government decided to be proactive rather than reactive in the way that it responded to it. And so it put a big community of a whole range of different people together to bring about the anti-racist action plan. And this coincided with a lot of other things that were happening in Wales as well, which was the implementation of the new curriculum for primary schools, for secondary schools, and it was about breaking barriers down between traditional subjects in school areas. And because of what we were doing in 2020, it also made Black history, the themes and experiences of diverse communities, mandatory in the national curriculum. And so for GEM, which of course is responsible for education in museums, does a lot to support museum educators. Bringing these two together was absolutely essential. And so they applied to the Welsh Government for grant funding to fund a 3-year programme. And so they asked me if I could put a team together to deliver that programme for them. And what was so important about the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan when working with museums is that it focuses on historical honesty, to be honest about what you have in your collections and to celebrate diversity, and also to ensure that your activities are co-created. So what does that actually mean when you're working within the education environment? Now, here's a word that some of you may be familiar with, but some of you may not be. This is cynefin. Cynefin is a Welsh word, and in the pink box there, you get an outline of the sorts of things that it can mean: identity, home, belonging. And with a new curriculum in Wales, it's basically whatever subject you teach should come from your local area. And Charlotte's going to be explaining a lot about what that means to her in a minute. But this basically, how do you make local stories global? How do you reach out using what you have? And this is where museums play a massive role. And so there's a great encouragement now for schools and museums to work together in ways that they have never done before. Now, this all sounds great, it all sounds wonderful, but when I was putting the programme together, I needed to find out where the issues were. We knew we had an enthusiastic workforce, but there is always resistance. How do people feel about it at grassroots level? And certainly the Welsh Government, when the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan came out, they did an interim survey. And the problems that were coming from not only the museum but other heritage and cultural sectors as well, was they didn't feel it was relevant to all parts of Wales. Wales is a very white country, and even though we have a great deal of diversity in our larger cities, predominantly the rest of the country is pretty white. But certainly the work that I've been doing made it perfectly clear that inclusion, diversity is for everybody. And with the new curriculum, we want to make sure that our young people are growing up to be ethical and informed citizens of the world. And it is a privilege for every part of Wales to learn about these stories. And then about that that personal responsibility. And sometimes you will be aware, when you yourself are doing this work, sometimes you're working on your own. You're the only person at your site that bears this responsibility. And it's a huge burden. So it was about providing confidence and knowledge to support the work as it went forward. And we can see this with the survey that GEM itself did with Robin Johnson, who is over at the GEM stall on the other side of the hall here today. He produced a survey that looked at, yes, there was a massive appetite within the museum sector in Wales for this work, but they were very honest in saying, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the confidence to drive this forward, and they would be very open to formal training. And so that is where I came in and talking to the people. Where did they feel that they needed the most help? A lot of it was in that confidence building, and it is traumatic, researching traumatic histories. It is, when the burden falls on you to do this work yourself, it's a heck of a responsibility. And so what can we do to support museum staff who are frequently working on their own so that they feel confident enough to engage in this work enthusiastically, make those connections that make this work so positive? And a lot of this was about managing capacity. I put together a very broad team of people. We had altogether just over 20 people delivering various parts of the programme. 14 of them were of ethnic minority heritage, and we've got Beloved Adonai at the top there and Natalie Jones at the bottom. One of the things that we did that proved very, very successful was we understand that museum staff just don't have enough time. And so we produced these 1 hour sessions on subjects the museum sector themselves wanted to know about. And so it was, how do I speak to teachers? How do I understand what teachers want? How do I make sure that what we're doing extends beyond tokenism, that we actually embed what we're doing in our day-to-day practice? And along with these hour sessions, we did a whole series, and of course this spreads over 3 years, of half-day sessions, full-day sessions, and this is when we explored in real detail what is the new Welsh curriculum about? What does anti-racist practice actually mean when you're delivering it? And also, we don't stand alone. Sometimes in the museum sector we can be very enclosed and not look at what other people are doing. But I've always been very keen in my practice to look at what other countries are doing. And so I reached out to museum practitioners all over the world, in Canada, America, Germany, the Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, to find out. And I do recommend you do this. I did not contact a single country or museum that did not come back to me. Every single one of them responded. And they based their learning around questions, and we wanted to make sure that we were asking questions, because when you start doing the thinking, it wasn't a case of us telling museum people what to do. It was about encouraging the thinking, asking the questions, so that people themselves could understand where this work was going and where they themselves could personally take it. And this was a really, really powerful element of the programme. And so we had the big picture stuff here, but also concentrating on the day-to-day perspective as well. And what can you do at your site? What can you do? What can you do yourself? What can you take personal responsibility for? And I think that is too small, so I'm going to have to come over here. But the thing here, not making assumptions about each other. Just because you have a school group that might have somebody of a different ethnicity in the group, don't expect them to know everything about an object that you have that's related to that ethnicity. Sometimes we internalize things too much. And the power of making a mistake, the power of actually moving forward from having made a mistake, and how that can inform the next thing that you do. It's not a race, it's a process. It's not a switch. You build it up over time. And, ask yourself, why? What are you there for? And that proved very positive. And also, how often do we actually get a chance to look at our sites with new eyes? It was so exciting really, really exciting. Do an audit. What are your signs like? How welcoming are our museums? When you open the door, when you walk in, how welcoming are they? Do they make you feel at home? What language are you using? The AOLEs, for those in England, may not recognise that, but those are areas of learning and experience that's part of the new curriculum for Wales. What evidence do you have of diverse voices, and how much evidence are you reflecting of the global histories behind the objects that you are working with? And we were also working to the bigger picture as well. What values do you hold? What values do your institution hold? And we can see here, what cultural value do your collections have, and how can you bring that out? And how well do your collections really reflect that history? And this is where that historical integrity that we were talking about at the beginning really came to the fore. And a big one with acquisitions policies. Are you changing your acquisitions policies to reflect the new communities around you? And can your communities trust you to represent them with their objects and also with the stories that you want them to tell you? And how will you pass these on to future generations? And we did that through, and it is about, it happens through you, that personal responsibility that we recognised at the very beginning. And looking back, and this is somebody from a Canadian museum who told me this, every year we've learned and we've reflected and refined our programme. It is not a race, it really is a process. And we, over the 3 years, we ran 18 training sessions, of which we had 384 registrations. Our case studies, that is available today. Thank you, Katya, for bringing them. More are available on the stand over there with Robin. That was opened nearly 600 times within the first week. And it's been looked at online by just under 5,000. And this was to the publication of the report, and obviously been opened a lot more since then. And I'm delighted to say that responses to all our training programs, 91% scored it as either excellent or good. And regarding what we recognised as those challenges that we felt that we could help museum practitioners cross the line through our training, was understanding how they can understand their collections, that it gave them that knowledge exchange of talking to each other, and lived experience of, Audrey was of Jamaican heritage, and Audrey's insights helped me rethink how we talk about different topics, difficult topics. Rather than avoiding them, we should be mindful in how we approach them. And the confidence to make mistakes, and the confidence to see mistakes as opportunities, and the confidence to realise that this actually leads to a more inclusive society. But what about the communities that we've been working with? Well, this is the responses from some of the communities we've been working with over the 3 years in the museums, as they have been embedding their knowledge into their practices. And this is Ligny Mfekala Jean Samuel here with Rachel Evans of Conwy Culture. And these are responses from different community members that we had. And I felt proud to have contributed. I felt this was a place that wanted to learn about my lived experiences. I have more urge to visit a museum to learn more about history. It gives me an insight in how museums operate and display, and gives me inspiration to approach the museum and share my views and thoughts. Make me want to ask questions and understand context rather than first impressions. That I'm seeing that people are making me and my culture more inclusive. Now, it is still very much a work in progress. You know, we still have got a long way to go. But certainly I think the power of listening to people, and the power of having that sort of overarching vision from the Welsh Government and the funding to do it has really made a difference. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to somebody who's actually, it's fine for me to natter on about it, but Charlotte is the one actually delivering it. Charlotte, over to you.
Amazing, thank you. So just walk that way. Hold on.
Whichever way. Just press that.
Cool.
Anyway.
Okay, hello. I'm checking that everyone can hear me Great. Last time I done a talk, my mic died and no one could hear me. So I'm Charlotte and I'm basically going to take you through a case study of what Cyfarthfa Castle Museum and Art Gallery has worked on within the Arawak project. So just a little overview of who we are in case you've never heard of us. So we are a castellated mansion in the South Wales Valleys, and the castle was built as a home to the Crochet Ironmaster family in 1825. And today we hold a collection of over 18,000 objects, and that contains both artifacts and art-based collection. But it's a very eclectic collection. So we hold things from the Crochet family themselves, but then we also have an Egyptology collection from Cairo. We've got a king penguin, the Shackleton brought back during his Nimrod exhibition, and then we've got a vast majority of just curios from around the world, really. So the project started thanks to Marion and to Welsh Government. And we were picked as a case study museum to basically have a scoping report written to identify colonial collections within Cyfarthfa Castle's collection. And I believe there was around 5 or 6 museums that were identified to have this scoping report carried out. So we were quite fortunate to have that work and that expertise to come in and do that role for us. So we kind of had at least a foundation as to where to start. So the report identified some items that we fully expected to be on there, but then it also identified a lot of objects that we really hadn't taken a thought to and really where those colonial roots could have been coming from. And some of the key cultures that are identified were Indian, Southeast Asian, African and Caribbean. Okay, so to start with, we really had to figure out how we wanted and where we wanted to start. So it really started with identification. So we noticed that throughout our colonial scoping report that there were some themes that kept cropping up, and it was all around luxury imports. So tea, sugar and coffee. And I think that everyday items that maybe we kind of overlook. So it was somewhere that we could start, that we've got a little bit of kind of emotion attached to. We all have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the morning. And we really wanted to figure out how we could integrate this into the formal learning programme, community programmes, and then also into the permanent exhibition areas. We also needed to identify who our partners were going to be, and we really leaned on the professionals in the community like Marion to help kind of link us with those community members that we know would be kind of familiar with the project but also open to working with us and having a very open dialogue and being aware that on both sides we're probably going to say something wrong or make a mistake along the way. So it's having everyone on kind of that even playing field from the beginning. And then we also really wanted to make sure that there was meaningful engagement from the start. The project for Arawak, I always joke, it never has an end. It will never end. It's always going to keep on going. And that's kind of your goal with your communities. You never want the project to end and then you never speak to them again. They should be integrated into your museum as a kind of a permanent partnership. So we identified a Coalport tea set from the scoping report. And it was on permanent display in one of our permanent galleries, and it was something that we literally walked past every single day. And it was part of the Crochet collections. There was a nice link there for us to start bridging those conversations. The imagery on the tea set is very typical of what you would find for Southeast Asia and kind of tea plantations and temples and that very typical landscape. But the tea set was identified as being 1840s, which is when Indian tea culture kind of became very prominent and started being imported into the UK. So we felt like the imagery on this tea set in particular didn't really acknowledge or represent the true communities behind that tea kind of plantation and importing. And that was the item that we identified for our initial project called Time for Tea at Cyfarthfa. As kind of the project grew and we built on it, there was 2 other items identified for another project called Bridging Cultures, and that is kind of the project that we hope truly will never end. So we had Indian State steel rail that was made in Cyfarthfa Steelworks that obviously went to India for railway tracks. And then we've also got 2 truck shop system tokens. So one is a tea token that would have been given to tea plantation workers as their payment, and they would only have been able to spend those on the plantations. And then the truck shop system token was basically the same for ironmasters in the UK, particularly in Wales. They would pay their workers in a token that they could only spend in their shops. So what have we been doing? We researched Indian tea production and Indian tea lifestyle and culture from 1840 to modern day. And we decided that we would have the teapot and the tea set 3D scanned so we could have an exact replica of that tea set. so we could redepict the imagery on there. So Marion very kindly linked us with the Indian Heritage Centre UK, and we worked with a group, they're based in Cardiff, to basically go through the whole Indian colonial collection that was identified in the scoping report. And we gave them little, you'll see it on one of the next slides, little outlines of teapots. And we basically told them, draw, write, put anything down on paper that you would like to see on the new tea set. Something that if anyone from your community comes into the museum and they know straight away this is representing you and that it's been accurately done. We also, as part of the Bridging Cultures project, commissioned an artist, Daniel Trivedi, who is an Indian artist, and he was basically commissioned to ignite the collection and respond to it in his way as an Indian person of culture and heritage, and see what he really could bring to light as well to start those conversations with the community. So, the physical outcomes of both projects, so both Time for Tea and Bridging Cultures. The teapot is bottom left and top middle of the PowerPoint. It is lovely. We have children come in, and because it's kind of not in a case, they can handle it and they can really have a little look at it. We've written around the top of it how you would traditionally make tea as well. So, we just pop the tea bag in the mug and pop the boiling water on it. It's a little bit more in detail for Indian culture. And then as part of Bridging Cultures with Daniel's commission, the image on the far right is Daniel's commission piece, and he basically took inspiration from those tea tokens and those truck shop system tokens to redepict British tea culture on the top of the image, and he enamelled into copper. And then the bottom kind of brings us up to today and how environmental impact on those tea plantations are affecting the wildlife and the environment. So he's enamelled in the animals that are affected today and back then as well. And then the middle image is the start of our reinterpretation. So we've taken off some of the archaeology in the castle and we've put Bridging Cultures up instead. And we hope that as the project develops, the case can be very fluid and very community-led, and as we start working with other communities and we identify new objects, we can start replacing some of those objects out and constantly telling new stories. So hopefully anyone that comes into the museum that maybe isn't Welsh should be able to find themselves in there somewhere. So I've popped in some of the nice images that we've done throughout the project. So the little teapots are the ones that our Indian Heritage Centre UK done, and we've also started integrating that into some school workshops. Schools in particular, I think, are very driven by in Wales for the new curriculum and their incorporation of Black History Month as well. So I do find in October it does tend to be every school wants to do something that will link with Black History Month. So I've thrown teapots at them left, right and centre. And it's really lovely to see what the kids actually come up with, because they've got to research it for themselves, come up with the imagery for themselves. I just give them the bare bones of where tea comes from, and we'll see what narrative they come up with. And almost all of them will always have a ship, the Union Jack and the Indian flag, but I like to see what the little details are around them. We've also hosted an Indian Heritage Cultural Day at the museum with the Indian Heritage Centre. And that was basically for them to showcase exactly who they are and how they've worked with us. So we had some Indian dance, we had some tea pairing. So I didn't know that you actually pair tea with samosas. So we had rich teas out for us and samosas for them. And we also made the tea in the traditional way as well. The bottom middle image is the group actually helping me re-identify some of the collection that was identified within the report. A lot of it has been mislabeled. A lot of it is statuettes from temples. And they're all mislabeled as the wrong gods. So we've also had a little bit of help kind of updating our records, and hopefully we can move forward with updated, detailed records. And we also found out that one of the statuettes within the report will never go on display, and it's a good thing that we worked with them, because it would have been stolen from a temple and it should never have left. So now we know that as well, and it's been really helpful just in educating ourselves not to just assume everything can go on display either, even if we like the look of it. A little bit more school and community engagement, some of the Indian dance that was done, and this dance in particular incorporates some of the animals that are affected by tea plantation and tea harvesting in India. And then we also very recently done a project with two of our local schools to create tea tokens. So they basically had to do the same thing as the teapots. They had to illustrate on the clay tea harvesting and what that is to them and what they've researched. But they're going to use them as tea coasters. So hopefully, every time they put their cup of tea down, they'll remember where tea comes from. Ongoing and future projects. So as this will never end, We are going to start looking to see if we can do a very specific Empire-themed formal learning workshop, and that will be through everyday objects that we use in the museum, so tea caddy, sugar cutters, loose leaf tea, we've got a manila, and putting them on the table and really seeing if the children can find the link that is Empire through them, and having a very hands-on kind of object inquiry-based session. We're also incorporating the loose leaf tea and spices into our fairy tale session. The children have to weigh to make a stew, and now they're going to use the spices instead. So we're kind of incorporating it in a way that's not super obvious for the little ones, but hopefully the teachers are going to start getting the message and start incorporating it in quite nicely. We're also doing some new audits with People's Collection Wales to identify more in the collection, because we know the scoping report has really only just touched the surface with how vast the collection is. So we want to keep digging to see how many new stories we can pull out and how many people we can give those stories back to and give their voice back to. And we really, really want to start working on Caribbean and African artefacts. There's quite a vast amount of them within the collection, and we think it would be a good starting point, especially to be able to integrate into the galleries. There's enough that we can really start pushing it through. And we've also worked with a historian and professional in Wales called Abu Bakir, and he has written a Empire toolkit from 1840 to 1940, and it's a timeline of all of the kind of events that happened between industrialisation and just after World War, or during World War II, to identify some colonial themes the teachers may want to look at as part of their wider topics. And then, because I am a very typical museum person who wants to know everything about money, so I know how much funding I've got to go for, I've put some of the figures and the budgets up for you. So we have worked with 408 school pupils within the last 12 months on the Arawak-specific content, and we've worked with 5 BAME groups, either within Bridging Cultures or Time for Tea. We've had 1 Indian Heritage Cultural Day, 1 gallery redisplay and reinterpretation, 2 subject-specific training sessions, because we also need to build up our members of staff and our team to be confident in delivering it. It can't just be me. I am only one person, and I'd like everyone to be able to start helping and doing it and building their own confidence. And we've had 2 artist commissions. Funding as a whole was around 10,000, but you don't need £10,000 to start. You need £50 just to purchase or start reinterpreting one object, and you can build from there. We've just been very fortunate that the funding has timed itself quite well for us, but you really don't need £10,000 to start. And for everyone that knows how expensive museum cases are, the vast majority went on that, and the rest all went back into the communities. Nothing came back to us. It was all for the community-driven events and workshops and a display case. So it's super transparent. Yeah. Okay, I can't hear anything through this one at the moment.
Can you hear me talking now?
Yes.
Right, okay. Now, before we open to Q&A, what I want to do, because I live in North Wales, Charlotte lives in South Wales, and we rarely get a chance to chat about the project. So I want to ask you some questions if I can,
go
please.
for it.
Now, one thing that has come out very strongly is that we have really positive community responses. Sorry, I'll just let you get mic'd up.
We'll see. Keep going, Marion. I'll see if I can multitask.
We get really positive community responses, as you can see from what Charlotte was saying. Most museums, we find, whenever there are problems, it tend to be internal, because that thing about letting the responsibilities go to one person, that it's seen as other, it doesn't really become embedded. What within your organisation has enabled you to move so far? Because you mentioned there that you want other people within your organisation to be a part of it. Have you had resistance? How has that worked? How have you been able to get everybody involved?
Amazing. I'm going to take this out because I don't want to hear myself speak. That's awful. So we are really lucky in Cyfarthfa. We're quite a small local museum, and we're governed by the local authority, and we actually come under the branch of education. So very recently we kind of moved into education, and it's been the best thing ever for us. So we've been able to use the new curriculum and Welsh Government's Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan to back the work that we're doing. The communities in the schools have also taken really positively to all the work, and everyone's very keen to keep it going. We've also started working with, internally within the council, our community cohesion team as well, and they are very keen to help support us in linking with kind of refugee communities as well, and help them make sure they have a voice and seeing if they can identify with themselves in the collection. but I'm very aware that a lot of other museums maybe haven't got like the full positive support that we had. And as long as there's one of you in the museum that are willing to start doing the work, you can start doing the little steps. It hasn't got to be a big gallery display. You can literally just start with a sugar cutter or tea caddy, and you can build your evidence up that way. And hopefully with the case studies that are in the GEM Anti-Racist Wales edition, you can help evidence yourself that way as well. And I know a lot of pushback can come from immediately within the museum, maybe from senior management who are afraid of the conversations that could now be unlocked by kind of opening a loaded topic, but just use everything you can as evidence and pick something strong in the collection that you use on a daily basis, even if it's in a handling box, to prove that it needs to be done.
Yeah, that is absolutely excellent. And certainly one of the 1 hour sessions that we did was how to influence upwards, how to persuade upwards, how to make sure that you take your, it all depends what sort of organisation you are, whether you're a trustee-based organisation or local authority or what have you, that you can build that evidence to show the width. And when you're able to acquire the sort of grants that you have been able to acquire, that really does help. You've got the strong ethical and moral case, everybody knows that. But for a lot of people, senior managers, they need the business case as well. And the projects that we've been doing really do provide the evidence for that business case to be built. And so that's very positive. Now, you mentioned earlier on the responses you've had from schools, the school groups you've worked with. Now, we did do one entire session that was based on talking to teachers, listening to what teachers actually want. And sometimes you can take on the burden too much and want to compete with teachers or want to teach. And certainly the message that came forward in all of our training, don't compete with us. Mm-hmm. Actually, let us teach. Yes. You concentrate on your site, on your object, which seems to be what you did. Yes. What sort of conversations were you having with teachers? How did that work that enabled you to deliver the successful projects that you did deliver?
So we're very, again, being under that education branch, I've now got access to all of the teachers in Merthyr and all of the head teachers. So we've got 24 primary schools and 4 secondary schools in the smallest local authority in Wales. So there's a lot of us, and they're all working on the same new curriculum. But I am finding that there's a confidence issue. So some of the schools are already making quite big steps towards integrating kind of within humanities, kind of underrepresented people, and how kind of that links into Merthyr and Cynefin and that wider kind of outlook. But I'm really hoping that the kind of the timeline with Abu Bakr will help, and using the resources that are on Hub, on GEM, that can really like drive them forward. But I do think it's a confidence issue that they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. But again, with humans, we're going to say the wrong thing at some point, and as long as we can take accountability for it, and the children are aware of that, because if the teacher isn't going to have that conversation, the children are not going to be able to have those conversations when they go home either. So it's kind of that vicious circle. So when they come to us, just trying to embed Arawak as naturally as possible. Like I say, I want to do the Empire session, it will be very specific, but being able to integrate the tea set just into our normal Victorian session will make all the difference, and for the teachers to be able to make a link and go, that was really easy, and that's the strand that I need to go down, and now I can really like open that conversation up in the classroom. So just trying to give them those little feeding them a little bit, teasing them.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely brilliant, because another one of the sessions we did was what we call side door techniques, because sometimes you feel that you've got this massive subject in front of you that it is so huge. You want to do justice to it. You want to make sure that not only are that everything you do has integrity to the past, and also integrity to the people that you have and the children that you have in front of you. And side door techniques, where you start off with a traditional, maybe Victorian session, but then feed in the teapot and broaden the sort of conversations that you have around those, proved really, really successful. I think that is a fantastic example of how that works. Now, I think we've only got about 5 minutes left, so any questions that you might have, or comments about work that you yourselves might be doing? It'd be really lovely to hear what you are doing. That's a question.
Hey, thank you so much. That was a really interesting talk. Can I ask, what steps have you taken in your museum to kind of protect the well-being of staff or community partners who are from the global majority who are engaging kind of with this work?
So for Cyfarthfa in particular, taking that back out, we have been working with Marion, and then we also work with another professional, Beloved, who have kind of trained us up as staff as to kind of what we can expect from a very loaded conversation versus quite a calm conversation where we're all just feeding ideas. For me personally, I always like to have another member of staff there as well, so it's not just me, it's the museum manager or collections person, so there's kind of never two experts, but I'm learning and they are collections. We have two different kind of areas of knowledge to bring to the table. And we've been very fortunate in that the history that we've started working on is quite a nice history, and it's not as loaded as looking at tribes and kind of human remains. But I'm very much expecting that to be moving forward. So we are going to be working with Mind. We've got a local Mind in Merthyr, so they are very happy to come up and have a chat with us, and also just be in the room, because we don't know how that's going to affect our community members either. It's as much of the well-being as us as it is the community. So linking with your kind of local well-being agents and seeing if they're willing to come and just support, and then also having some external training as well on how to handle kind of loaded conversations and how to diffuse conflict has been really helpful for us. So I feel like I'm quite, like I say, introverted as I'm standing in a room. But the thought of having to kind of have a debate with someone, I don't enjoy that. So having someone else there who's kind of a neutral ground to diffuse is helpful as well. So 2 members of staff, outside agency, a little bit of training I found has helped us.
Yeah. And can I add to that as well, because that is a brilliant question. And certainly in Wales, when we go back again to policy, this is the 10th anniversary in Wales of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And within that, Wales has been looking, because it is, a devolved government that has special responsibilities for certain areas. And so every decision, and museums are sort of, and plus all the other, at-length bodies, it is in their awareness all the time that whatever decisions they make, how does that impact on future generations? And so for 10 years, it is there whenever we make decisions about things. That was a brilliant question. Yeah, excellently answered. Thank you.
Hi, and thank you to both of you. I have a question about objects, actually. Charlotte, you said that this kind of started from this audit of your objects. You've got this amazing collection, 18,000, did you say? Do you have any advice for sites that don't have that big collection? Because it seems like the conversations you had comes from specific objects like the tea caddy and etc. So any transferable insights that can are to do with, I guess, human stories as opposed to objects in particular?
So if you guys have got kind of history files as well, not just kind of like the physical collection, I'm going to signpost to Glamorgan Archives now, because they've got basically a really handy PDF that goes through all of the terminology, or a lot of terminology that would naturally be linked with colonialism and colonial collections and stories. So when you're kind of scouring through your archive and through your systems to look for those stories, if they may not be obvious to you, use that Glamorgan Archives Anti-Racist Wales guidance to search the terminology. I found that's been really helpful, because we found that whilst we did identify a lot of the Indian statuette collection, off the back of searching some more of that terminology, we have found collections, the link to it, that weren't identified in that scoping report originally, because they were obviously working through a different framework of terms, quicker framework basically. So yeah, using the Glamorgan Archives and just pinpointing the keywords and just searching. If you've got an O drive or if you're on cloud, however you work, search. Just search.
Yeah. And can I add to that as well? With Welsh, I've just had Welsh Government funding now to produce, because the object review that Charlotte was talking about earlier, that we basically did that as a pilot. We learned our way around as we were doing it. We worked it, we developed it with further museums, and so I'm producing a set of 3 videos with accompanying documentation on how to do your collections reviews, what sort of words to use, how do you explore to widen them, then how do you do the research behind them, and then the third one will be how do you work with your communities to explore the broader stories. That they will all be available free online by next February. So I know you've got several months to go. It'll be on, Charlotte's already mentioned it already, Hub. Hub is the Welsh Government resource for educators. So HWB, Hub. So in about 9 months' time, just Google hub. That will take you straight there, and our resources will be on there that will be able to help you with that.
Very much. Thank you to Charlotte and Mary. Give them a round of applause. Thank you. I'd just like to add with that last question, I mean, I think that, we know that the UK, literally every part of the UK, every town has probably got some link, either direct or indirect, to slavery. It was such a massive impact. So I think you can, as Charlotte said, I'm sure that there are things you can probably find in local archives or through the stories or for the people that owned the nearby houses, or it depends on your site. But yeah, if you need any other help, please do come and ask at the GEM stand.